We stop for no person. Good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission of January 28th, 2014. A reminder that this meeting is being recorded. I would ask your approval to one change in the agenda, which is to bring item 11C out of executive session into the main part of the meeting, which will enable us actually to forego the executive session.
Oh, nice.
Is there any objection?
No.
The reasons will become evident when we talk about it.
Okay.
All right. Hearing no objection, the agenda as amended is approved, or as revised, it's probably a better word. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of December 10th, 2013?
I'll make that motion with one correction because there was a he instead of a T, the, and I've forgotten where it was. Janine, maybe the second page of the minutes. And I
don't know
didn't.
you have my packet.
You can,
Oh, wise guy.
you can find it and give it to her. And
Yeah.
with that,
That's fine.
with that correction, I will.
I'll second
If
with the
this estimate
correction.
includes key cost of a temporary temporary, it's
Make a
under
note and give it
the
back to
background. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. May I have a motion to ratify the warrant of January 22nd, 2014, please?
So moved.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimously approved. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, we move on to pending leases and contracts. I believe there's just one item. Why don't you pass the warrant? Mr. Rafter, would you tell us?
The
or-
one item is for the assignment of the Taylor hangar. The commission had previously approved the new format, and we just had to finalize with our attorney that there were no other probate documents or anything else required. The Taylor Group has signed the assignment letter, so we're just asking for the commission to approve and sign that tonight. They've already approved it. It just needs to be signed tonight.
Are there any questions? Do we need to approve it or not?
I think
believe
it's been approved.
I think it's been
It just
approved.
needs
That's right.
execution.
Okay. So it's not really an action item then? It's an information item. Okay. Pending matters.
On the air traffic control tower rehabilitation, the request for qualification status, Janine is finalizing that. There were some questions regarding federal law and Massachusetts law regarding project manager and things of that nature. So we're sending it downtown to Heidi for her review, and that should be getting issued very shortly. There is in your packet, and I believe we're going to need action on this, the supplemental agreement to the other transaction agreement. You may recall a few months back we had some concerns. We sent them to FAA. They've come back now with this supplemental agreement and request your approval of that. This is for the project and outlines the funding and that type of thing. It's a little difficult to follow the update because they just make deletions and things here, but it references back to the original document, which we have copies of if you don't have that.
Yeah, it looks like they deleted like 2 and 3, and then number
And then
4,
they
they actually
skip-
said delete in its entirety on.
Well, and that's
Lowell's
why
Institute.
if you look in the beginning, it gives a summary of what sections they deleted, and it's fairly confusing.
Yeah.
But we went through it today, Janine and I, and it covers our requests for changes that we put in there.
I guess I'm, by default, the lead contact, but this is interesting in that it has my home address and home phone number rather than This is on the,
Yeah, contact.
and I wonder, should it not really have the airport's
Yeah, it should be.
phone number and address? I mean,
I'm
I can
sure-
go ahead and sign it, we
Yeah,
can
I'm sure
change
we
it
can
by
change
hand,
that.
but it should be really in your care.
Yeah, I'm also on there as well.
Are there any questions or comments on the supplemental agreement to the other transaction agreement to the,
To the modifications? or the-
Quite a,
Action modification.
quite a name.
Mr. Gasparo?
I would make a motion that we execute the supplemental agreement, number 1.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Are there further comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Carried unanimously.
On the update on the town procurement policy, I have the framework outlined and a draft started on a procedure that will hopefully replace the majority of the MOU, as I've discussed before with the new procurement officer. We'll still have an MOU, but it'll be very brief, and it'll reference this procedure that will outline who will be doing what on both sides. And I'm hoping to have that completed within the next week to 10 days and down to Heidi and procurement.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Anything on the finance front?
Just that we're going to be asking for your signatures tonight on the Mass DOT grant applications for some equipment that we're applying for. And a reminder and thank you to the commission about the change in the warrant process of signing it, and I think it's a good idea. We can bring it to the meeting. If somebody can't make it, we can come in and do it that way, so. That's it on the finance side.
Where do we stand with the finance committee at this point on the budget?
They haven't asked for anything back. I haven't heard anything. I'll reach out to Matt and find out what the next status is, if they're going to recommend our budget or not. I need to find out, but I haven't heard any otherwise.
And the Board of Selectmen reviewed the budget last week.
Last week, yes.
And, had a few questions, but no significant comments.
Yep.
Okay. Master plan?
Master plan, quite a bit of activity there. There's going to be an advisory committee meeting on the 25th at 1 o'clock upstairs, and we've asked the consultant to come down to our meeting that night to brief everyone on that with regard to the schedule, the updates on the sections that have been drafted, forecast, the analysis, the noise, the financial, all in the inventory gathering stages, and an update on the advisory group and what's happening. What they're going to be doing is issuing an email with an FTP site shortly where members of the advisory committee can go in and get the details on this information. And one of the things they want to talk about a little bit at the meeting is how to get this information to the public without being overburdensome. In other words, there may be executive summaries, and if somebody's interested in a particular subject, they can click on a link and go get all the data and the detail, rather than just putting it out in these large formats. So that's one of the things we're looking to try to streamline, if you will, to get. We don't want people disengaged. We want them engaged in the process.
Will the commission be able to access the FTP site as well?
I would assume so, yes. Yeah, we'll make sure that's possible.
And we are getting an update at the next meeting from Mr. Richardson?
At the February 25th meeting.
February 25th meeting. All right. Any questions from the commission? As item 6A, we will insert the discussion related to the Bunker Road parcels. And what I'd like to do is ask Mr. Rafter to fill you in on what's been going on the last few days, and then we can get Mr. Carberg involved in a technical discussion of what's happening, to the extent that's necessary. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we can move forward with. And then we sort of have an action plan that we I'd like
Okay.
to present for consideration.
I'm not sure if you recall or if we reported this to the commission, but back in October, there was a piece of ordnance found in a dirt pile. The state police were notified and destroyed it safely. However, I instructed NOAA to do some research and some due diligence and checking into, how to handle unexploded ordnance and make sure that we're moving forward in a safe manner. And what we discovered was that the airport is what's known as a formerly used defense site. There's about 4,000 or 4,600 of these sites throughout the country. And essentially the way it works is the United States has a program where they've identified these sites, and as funding becomes available, they've prioritized certain ones, and they do a further investigation and eventual remediation. Because of this, the discovery of this piece of ordnance, we had a conference call with the Army Corps last week, and because of the discovery of the ordnance, it may bring us up into a higher priority, and that's what we're going to work with the Army Corps to see if we can expedite the remediation process on the Bunker Road parcels. It's about a 2-acre piece out in the bunker area. So the recommendation was for us to hire a licensed site professional. We have had discussions to create a scope for the licensed site professional. We have further discussions with the Army Corps this Thursday in that regard to move forward and develop a plan as to how to address the site, the issues, and what recommendations in terms of how to operate in that environment. I think I've covered most of it.
There was a study in 1988.
Oh, yes. In 1988,
I'm sorry, 2008, not 1988, 2008.
was it 2008?
Wasn't it 2008?
2007.
Okay,
Yeah, right.
2008.
It was issued in 2008, the report.
And, yeah, there was one study that identified us as the FUD site. The second study was a report that identified what some of the issues and concerns were and narrowed it down to, there's actually, I guess, the entire airport's a FUD site, and there's 3 areas of concern. And in one of the area concerns out on the Bunker Road parcels, there's about a 2-acre section that may contain some of these materials and could possibly be a burial site from when the military was here. So again, it's a I think they call it a site inspection. It's a first level of investigation that is done to just basically look at what the potential may be in that area. We now have to try to move it into the next phase, which would be a more in-depth investigation, and then determine a remediation action plan. So
There are, well, depending on how you slice the cake, I guess there are officially 8 FUD sites on the island, although 3 of them are the Tom Nevers
lumped
Navy
into one,
facility.
yeah.
And one is the beach right next to that. And then there's the airport, and there are 2 or 3 others. Some of them have been, the remediation has been completed, according to Army Corps website. And so this stuff is all spelled out on the website, but it was something that none of us knew anything about until last week. When that helicopter was flying around, that was part of the remediation of the Tom Nevers site, I believe, although there's some indication that it was finished sooner, so.
we're looking into a number of things, again, to develop our plan, but as you may recall, we had Phase 1 21Es done on this site, and in that environmental look, it referenced that there was a record of FUDs, but that the Army Corps had cleared the site, which is not, I don't believe that that's accurate. So we had no reason to believe that there would be an issue out there, but now we've discovered that we are on a FUDs list, and again, we went through all the files, and there's basically nothing in there. We found a lot of this, or I should say NOAA found a lot of this online in terms of doing due diligence, so good and bad that we uncovered it, but, we have to deal with it, so.
Noah, is there anything you want to add to the discussion at this point? Please identify yourself.
Hi, Noah Carberg, Airport Environmental Coordinator. It's more of a preemptive statement as to why we're looking at a licensed site professional when FUD's cleanup is the responsibility of the DoD and the Army Corps of Engineer. There's a gap in the process between when we're identified for cleanup, just the way this project is rolled out. In the meantime, we have to do our due diligence with how to move forward to this site. And we're kind of in a gray area. The purpose of the Army Corps of Engineer future remedial investigation is to decide on and accomplish a number of surveys that will give us the information on how we need to go forward. We can't go forward until we have the Army Corps of Engineers to fund this study. Otherwise, we kind of are taking on the role of the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a very involved and complicated process. The LSP, in the meantime, is really going to help us bridge the gap into deciding what is our due diligence going forward and working with the Army Corps of Engineers.
At the present time, because this is deemed a low to medium risk site, the schedule for the next phase of the study takes it out to 2035. Which is, I won't be here then. I'm
However,
sure.
Again, in our conversation with the Corps, though, they did indicate that because of the fact that, we have folks operating out there and that there was a piece of ordnance discovered, it may elevate us and hopefully try to bring us in closer to some of that. So that's our goal.
Ideally, that would be the only piece of ordnance out there, but we can't take that risk, so we've come up with a game plan. You want to describe the game plan?
Well, essentially, it's, as I say, we're going to be notifying our tenants. We're getting the LSP on engaged and developing a scope with the Army Corps, and then proceeding with whatever recommendations they make. We may be able to still operate. The LSP has indicated that you might be able to do certain activities on that site with the guidance of an LSP, and if you go further, you may need another type of consultant. And then, again, we're continuing to work with the Army Corps. They mentioned that there's a possibility of funding in 14 or 15 to do their next site investigation. So, and we're also going to be putting it out to the media tomorrow, a press release, so that everyone's aware of what's going on in case they hear anything.
Have in front of you, and if any, welcome any comments on. The specific issue that we were going to take up at the executive session, but which I think, because this is all out there, we can and should take up here is the issue of proceeding with the G.A. Smith lease. And we have been advised by council that we should hold off on any further action on that lease until we know better what is happening.
If I may, Daniel, and I agree with holding off on the formal action. However, we have continued with the comments and restructuring of the agreement, that type of thing. So we don't want it to just die. We're running it parallel, but the advice, I think, as you say, was to not execute it yet until we get this resolved or under control.
And hopefully we're going to be able to give the existing tenants who are affected by this some guidelines as to what they can do.
Correct.
With the help of the LSP. Some guidelines as to what they can do and what they
And
shouldn't do.
Do we have an LSP at this point?
Not yet.
Okay.
We've discussed it with one. We're formulating a scope that we need to get the Army Corps involved with. And then what we'll do is we'll receive a proposal from the LSP. We may get some other cost proposals from others. They're exempt from 30B procurement regulations, but we still want to make sure we're getting the right pricing, too, and things. So.
Mm-hmm. So you probably have no idea how much time you're going to need this LSP, or?
We tried to ask today how much time and what the estimated cost would be, and they said they couldn't give us any estimate until we got a further, definition around what it is they're going to be doing from input from the Army Corps. If there's good news, there are people in the Army Corps and the LSP that are familiar with the island, and as Dan said, the Tom Never site and some other FUDs on the island. So So that's something positive.
So that's where we are. And that's sort of I'd like to get the Commission's general blessing to the course of action we're proposing to take here, because I think it's important that we all be together on this, and, hopefully recognize that we, as remote as it may be, there is potentially a public safety issue here that we need to be cognizant of and deal with. Is that a fair statement?
Yep. You want to be safe.
I would just say I agree with the course of action. My only question is Mr. Smith been made aware of the situation, or can you reach out to him so he just doesn't see?
We're anticipating notifying all the tenants, including G.A. Smith, tomorrow, as soon as we get the formal. We've got to get some language from our attorney on that, too.
We've asked the attorney to prepare a written notice.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at.
And we'd hoped it would be done by now, but it isn't. So,
Are you concerned that they'll know about this now that we've had our meeting and discussed it in the meeting before they get their notice?
well, that's the risk we have to take.
Okay.
I think that's the risk we had when we interviewed Mr. Rafter. You weren't around for that wonderful experience.
Joy.
And so I think that we're trying to compress the process as much as practicable.
Yeah. Ideally, we would have preferred to give them notice first, but we're working through a number of issues here. so.
And the commission needed to know about it
Right,
first.
oh,
So,
definitely, yes.
this has all been very quick.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments on that? No, keep you posted.
Okay, thank you.
What else do you have to tell us, Mr. Rafter?
Not a lot via projects. The Reels and Pappy on 1533 are still open. Carbon Neutral, we received 2 proposals, and that's going through the review process. And I thought some of the other proposals we received were thick, but this is at least 2 6-inch thick binders to be reviewed. So Noah and the team have their work cut out for them. We are in the process of preparing applications. As I mentioned earlier, MassDOT, number of pieces of equipment, applications there. The big piece of equipment, though, that we're going to be applying to the FAA for is a fire truck. And Preston Harriman has done a great job preparing initial draft of the scope of work, working with the consultant, and we're going to be preparing that grant application shortly. On the RFP/RFQ side, we received the engineering proposals. We have a meeting Thursday to review those. And on the fuel, we received 2 of those also, and we're in the process of reviewing them. On the operations, as I mentioned before, accounting and admin is in a new building, and we're hoping to have the FBO moved in by the end of February. And then we've had some statistics, which I can somewhat summarize. For the year-end, calendar year-end 2013, we continued at this time through the calendar, and starting in January, we're going to be going to a fiscal year measurement here. But the operations are down, and the employments are up slightly. And what we're seeing and what is being identified in the master plan is that the growth area is in the seasonal time frame, and we're seeing it drop off in the off-season. So it's we're very dependent on the seasonal traffic, and I think you'll see that in some of these slides. As I mentioned, the operations are down slightly from I'll take it if you want to take it, whatever. From 125,000 down to 121, almost 122,000. So they're down slightly. And again, you can see the peak months, and you'll see it when we get into fuel, where it really, the peak seasonal months are very steep. Operations for 13, Dave, I thought the operations were, oh, this is fiscal year.
Fiscal year.
Yeah. Fiscal year, we're up 5%. At the end of 13 calendar year, we're down. And through 14, you can see we're down 3.6. The employments, as I say, though, they're up slightly for the year, 1.64 total up. But again, we are down significantly in December and in November. And as I mentioned, you can see the peak months of June, July, August, and even some of September is where we're seeing the increases. What we're in the process of doing is we're trying to, Dave's going to look at the statement that we heard Island make that they're carrying about the same number of passengers with less operations. I want to verify that through the statistics.
Have we had any indication, by the way, that they're buying fuel from us?
Not yet, no. And I'm going to be reaching out to Mr. Cunningham on that. What you'll see, too, when you get the forecast or the analysis from the master plan, you'll see a lot of detail on and discussion on what's occurring with regard to the traffic and the peak season, off-peak season. And just when you go through these documents, you have to keep that in mind. They broke it down in a format that says, here is the year-round, here's the seasonal market, and what the differences are. And freight is down also for the year, 3.4. The good news is the number of Jet A fuel gallons are up over last year, and although we don't have the total here for the year, it's very close, probably within 15,000 gallons of the total for 2011. But you can see in this graph here the dynamic change, for June through September, and how much of our business is done in that period. Avgas is the same type of thing. It's down slightly, though you see it down in July. And we have some thoughts on try to rejuvenate some of that, too.
Have you shared, I don't recall that you shared with the commission the anecdotal evidence about the planes going over to Hyannis and buying fuel there?
I don't know that I did. And we have a mixture of supportable data and anecdotal. NOAA has done some data mining and found that a number of larger corporate jet aircraft were landing in Nantucket, leaving and going to Hyannis for a few days, and then coming back to Nantucket, picking their passengers up and leaving. And our first thought was, well, is it the price of fuel? Is it the cost of our landing fees, our ramp fees? What may be driving it? And the anecdotal information we found out was that it's not necessarily the fees as much as it is lack of hotel rooms in the summer season. That they just can't find hotel rooms, and they're dropping their passengers off and going over to Hyannis for hotels. So we mentioned that to our master plan consultants, and had a brilliant idea from one of our commissioners to consider looking at a facility possibly on the airport that may address that. And when you think about it, there could be a number of benefits to something of that nature. So the next stage of the master plan will be looking at alternatives analysis and other needs and things, and that's where we're going to really get into discussions of those types of things. So
It was also interesting at the Civic League session on Old South Road development last night. It was mentioned, I think, by Andrew Vorst that in the early 80s, I believe, the zoning in place for that part of Old South Road that's being discussed was amended to prohibit hotels and guest houses. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. The theory being that they shouldn't be in that neighborhood. So, it all sort of ties together, doesn't it, in a way? Mm-hmm. Any questions on the statistics or on the anecdotes? Oh, my goodness. Are there any subcommittee reports? I don't believe so.
No.
Are there any commissioners' comments?
No.
Is there public comment at this time? Yes, sir. I beg your pardon? You have a comment? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. This is a record.
Wow.
After last time
I'll be happy to
particularly.
get out.
I'll make that motion.
Was there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And no executive session?
No executive session.
Wow.
And so we don't have to do anything with these.
Dan has to sign.
Oh, okay.
We just have to hope we can get all those funded.
Yeah,
The
that's great.
state has a tremendous program.
Uh-huh.
What?